Looks like it is 12 o'clock and we are getting our YouTube started, our live stream. Our recording has started as well. I'm just going to give 1 or 2 more minutes to let people log in. Okay, we got the go ahead to get started. Perfect. Well, welcome and thank you for joining us for the Community Environment webinar, Journey to 2050. This is the second webinar that we've developed as part of the 3-part series where we're taking a closer look at the topics and issues that affect us all and are directly impacted by transportation. My name is Leilani Vailonga, and I will be your host today. I'm the communications specialist at MetroPlan Orlando as part of the regional partnerships team. And today I'm joined by some of our planning team. I'm going to invite them to turn their cameras on. And I'm not going to introduce them, they're going to introduce themselves. And let's see, is everyone on? Let's see. Wonderful. This is our usual cast of characters that they look familiar to you. We'll go ahead and start with Sarah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sarah Larson, and I'm a transportation planner with MetroPlan Orlando, and I'll be talking to you today about health and housing in a 2050 MTP.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jason Sartorio, and I'm a transportation planner with MetroPlan Orlando. And today I'll be presenting on the environmental and resilience components of the MTP.
And good afternoon. My name is Taylor Laurent. I'm the manager of transportation planning at MetroPlan Orlando and our 2050 Metropolitan Transportation Plans project manager.
Thank you. Okay. So in case you aren't familiar with MetroPlan Orlando, just a quick little bit about who we are and what it is that we do. So we are the Central Florida's Metropolitan Planning Organization, or as we refer to it ourselves as the MPO, and we lead transportation planning efforts in Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. We bring together elected officials, technical experts, and the community to shape our transportation future. And together, we set priorities and determine how federal dollars and state transportation dollars are spent in the region on transportation projects. So what is the 2050 MTP? We also refer to this plan as our 2050 plan. We are in the process of updating our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, our MTP. And this plan looks out 25 years into the future so that the work that we're doing is part of our 2050 plan update. And while the MTP is our long-term vision for the region, it directly connects our transportation improvement program, which is our 5-year plan. And that connection, or the bridge that's illustrated here, is our prioritized projects list, PPL, which includes the important transportation projects that reflect our community's needs and are anticipated to be cost feasible. So in July, we began this series with a look at the drivers of change and how they impact transportation planning for the future. And if you missed it, it's on our YouTube channel. We have a 2050 plan playlist that you can search for that one. And when we were talking about some of those drivers of change that we had touched on in July, some of those main topics included health, housing, and the environment. And today we'll take a closer look at those topics and how we're incorporating them into our 2050 MTP. And then we'll open it up to question and answers, a session at the end when we're gonna wrap up everything that the planners have shared with us, and then you're able to drop your questions into the question and answer button at the bottom. We also were able to get some questions from the registrants when you registered today. And so we'll also be trying to answer as many of those questions as possible. So our first topic is health, and I will go ahead and turn that over to Ms. Sarah Larson.
Good afternoon again. Thanks, Leilani. Sometimes people are surprised to find out that a transportation planning agency like MetroPlan Orlando is thinking about topics like health and not just roads and vehicles. Health, like the other topics on today's webinar, is impacted by our transportation network. So a little bit about the history of health planning for MetroPlan Orlando. We've been integrating health into our transportation planning process over the last decade. And this started with a health impact assessment on State Road 50 and an audit of some of our existing plans to look at how they've impacted health. We also developed a series of white papers on the connection between transportation and community health. And throughout all of this time, we've been collaborating with the Florida Departments of Health for Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County. We've actively been participating in their community health improvement programs and their community health needs assessments. And we provide transportation data that's relevant for them and share our transportation expertise with them. In 2022, we developed our health strategic plan, which was highlighting the connection between transportation and health here in Central Florida. This plan was developed as a resource to better incorporate the community health lens into our transportation planning efforts. And within this, we created 5 goals through the plan, which are supporting healthy lifestyles, implementing healthy transportation infrastructure, providing a safe transportation system, improving healthcare access through transportation, and integrating health equity into transportation planning. So when we embarked on the to health strategic plan as our baseline, and then we brought in partners in the health community that will be included in the 2050 MTP. This next slide shows some of our partners that we have been connecting with, and then specifically connected with for the 2050 MTP, such as the American Lung Association, the American Heart Association, the Health Council of East Central Florida, and the Well Florida Council, the City of Orlando, the Osceola Chamber of Commerce, and the Florida Departments of Health in Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. So we started looking at the existing commissions, and what that meant for us was looking at community chronic diseases. Those were high blood pressure, asthma, coronary heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and high cholesterol. And we wanted to know where these were the most prevalent. So we used the census and the CDC for some of this information. And we wanted to know this because what communities would benefit from things like sidewalks or walking trails, and which communities are most impacted by the negative externalities of transportation, like vehicle emissions. So this is one of the maps that we created for the 2050 MTP, and it shows the prevalence of asthma in our community. So you can see here on this map where light yellow is low and red is very high. Some of our highest prevalence areas include Sanford, West Orange County, Kissimmee, and St. Cloud. And then asthma is also high along State Road 50 and State Road 441. And when we looked at some of the other indicators, such as coronary heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity, they all had a pretty similar distribution across the census tracts. The one that was different, however, was high cholesterol, which you can see that map now. And again, you can see that light yellow to red prevalence, and we can see that high cholesterol is more prevalent in rural areas in unincorporated Orange, Osceola, and Seminole County. So we developed health goals for the MTP based off of what we had originally drafted in the health strategic plan, but using, this new data and also the feedback from our health partners. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about those goals and the desired outcomes for each of those goals. So goal 1, supporting healthy lifestyles. What that means is using active transportation, access for physical activity and recreational facilities, access to nutritious foods, and directly engaging with the community about health and transportation. So if you're on the call today, thank you. You're helping us achieve this goal in part. Goal 2 is implementing healthy transportation infrastructure. And so what that means is reducing air and noise pollution that comes from our transportation system, and then also minimizing the time spent in heat in order to reduce the risk of heat-related illnesses. So think about, planting shade trees along sidewalks or bus shelters at bus stops. Goal 3, providing a safe transportation system. You've probably heard us talk a lot about reducing the number of deaths and serious injuries on our roadways through our Vision Zero efforts. So this goal 3 is directly linked to our Vision Zero efforts. And an added bonus of fewer people facing death and serious injuries on our roadways is that it also alleviates some of the burden on our hospital system. So it's kind of twofold coming through here. And then another desired outcome within this goal is thinking about crime reduction when it comes to planning. And what does that mean exactly for transportation? Well, that can mean lighting, where things are bright and light, less negative things might happen. So lighting along trails and at bus shelters. Fourth goal is improving health access through transportation. When you think about how you're going to get to the doctor, you might think, oh, I'll just drive my car to get there. But not everyone has that luxury or option. It looks different for everyone. And so, considering how everyone can get to and from their healthcare facilities, since healthcare is a necessity. This came about because during our public opinion research survey, we found that 1/4 of Central Floridians have reported missing a doctor's appointment due to lack of reliable transportation. Our fifth and final goal is integrating community health into the transportation decision-making. And so what that ends up being is collaborating with our health partners, making sure that they're a part of our process and we're part of theirs. They're the ones who are talking with patients more directly that we don't necessarily have the opportunity or luxury to. So we can work with them, to help disseminate information or to get feedback from them about their experiences with the transportation system. All right, I'm going to be switching gears now over to housing. So like health, housing is another area that is both impacts and is impacted by the transportation system. Not only are housing and transportation the two largest expenses for most families, but where you live can dictate our transportation choices when you get up and go from point A to point B every day. So how are we linking housing and transportation in the 2050 MTP? The traffic on your roads that we see every day is linked to where people live. If you're living farther away from home, you're going to be on, from work at home. That's more time on the road. That can mean more congestion on our roadways and higher transportation costs. Um, and investments in transportation can make development or redevelopment more desirable. So for example, like a new expressway through an undeveloped area of land may foster new development. And then on the other side of things, investments in public transportation like Lynx BRT or Sunrail can spark redevelopment in areas to create higher density around those super stops and train stations. So in Central Florida, we've seen and will continue to see both types of development in our region. And that is why, for the first time, we will be including a discussion on housing in our long-range transportation plan. It is important to know, Metro Plan Orlando does not directly impact housing policies or zoning. However, we do recognize the importance of land use and housing accessibility in shaping mobility. So this section of the community chapter is not intended to be all encompassing. Like I said, it's our first time bringing it into the fold. So we consider it a step in the right direction when it comes to holistic planning. So how did we integrate housing into the 2050 MTP? So kind of similarly to the health component, we started with talking to the experts. We did stakeholder engagement with, you can see the names on the slide here of these different partners. And so we worked with these experts in the field to talk to them about, what are the goals, what are desired outcomes to come out of this. And we discussed housing challenges and what is important when connecting housing and transportation. Some of the topics that we discussed included transit-oriented development, balancing growth with access, limits to the current transportation system, and the burden of housing and transportation costs on residents. So what we learned shouldn't surprise you too much is that the cost of living is high and it's significant to a lot of people in the region and to our stakeholders too. There's a need to address affordability and access through coordinating housing development with transportation projects. And co-locating affordable housing near public transportation or employment centers is crucial. And that this type of transit-oriented development creates communities that provide both housing and transportation access. Not only that, but addressing the needs of older adults, low-income households, and individuals experiencing homelessness is essential to this conversation. So some of the desired outcomes to come out of this housing coordination process that's going to be integrated into the 2050 MTP is, what you can see on the slide here is these are desired outcomes. And these things impact our project priorities. We're going to continue to develop this. Again, this is our first step. We don't have as robust of things as we do in health, but maybe check up back for our next 2050 and you can see this continue to develop more. Again, we don't set land use or zoning policies, but we know that how development occurs does affect regional mobility, economic development, and planning. And so we can consider this as an important part of our vision for the future. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Jason, who's going to talk about environment.
Thanks, Sarah. The built and natural environment also influences the shape and character of our community. And as we plan for the future, it's also important that we balance our ever-growing mobility needs with preserving the environment and existing resources. The Metro Plan Orlando planning region spans approximately 1.8 million acres in Central Florida. In order to protect our environmental resources, we need to first identify what resources are within the Metro Plan Orlando planning region. So we leverage 61 databases from local, state, and federal agencies to identify existing environmental resources that are important to and or have value in our region. The impact that transportation projects can have on these environmental resources helps to inform the evaluation of projects that appear in our 2050 MTP. And we have many important types of environmental resources, including conservation lands, the Florida Wildlife Corridor, wetlands, lakes and rivers, endangered species and their habitats, floodplains, farmlands, and of course, local areas that recharge the Florida's aquifer. And over the course of this presentation, I'm going to touch on some of those environmental resources. We're going to start with conservation lands. Conservation lands are areas possessing natural values or features that are being managed, at least partially, for conservation purposes. Conservation lands include local, state, and federal parks, wildlife conservation areas, preserves, mitigation banks, and conservation easements. And in our region, some notable conservation areas include the 6,200-acre Lake Jessup Conservation Area, the 28,000-acre Tosahatchee State Reserve, the 14,000-acre Rock Springs Run State Reserve, and the 63,000-acre Three Lakes Wildlife Management Area. And these designated lands provide protection for area river basins, habitat preservation, and recreational opportunities in the region.Special designation areas are recognized by state, federal, and local agencies as being worthy of special protection due to their natural and aesthetic values, or are considered a natural resource of national, state, or regional importance. And in our region, one example is the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which has 17.7 million continuous acres of wilderness and working lands. And the Florida Wildlife Corridor stretches from South Florida to the Panhandle and includes a large portion of southern Osceola County, as well as eastern Orange and Seminole counties. And it serves as a link between Big Cypress National Preserve, Everglades National Park, and the Ocala and Osceola National Forest. Wetlands, lakes, and rivers are another important environmental resource for us. Wetlands are areas of land that are permanently, frequently, or occasionally inundated or saturated with water. Wetlands provide a wide range of values and function, including flood control, water quality, groundwater recharge, wildlife and fish habitat, and nutrient cycling and removal, as well as recreational, educational, and aesthetic values. Did you know that wetlands represent nearly 28% of Metroplan Orlando's planning region? That's approximately 491,390 acres of the region's total land surface. Major wetlands types in the regions include mixed wetlands hardwoods, cypress, wetlands forested mixed, and marshes. The Metroplan Orlando region contains a diverse array of natural habitats supporting a unique flora and fauna, including numerous federal and state protected species. There are 24 federally protected species, and our area also includes critical habitat for the West Indian manatee and the Florida bonnet bat. Our area also includes consultation areas for several federally protected species, including the Florida scrub jay, the Everglades snail kite, the Audubon crested caracara, sand skink, Florida grasshopper sparrow, red-cockaded woodpecker, and the Florida bonnet bat. Numerous state protected species are known to occur within the Metroplan Orlando planning region, including the gopher tortoise, roseate spoonbill, Florida sandhill crane, and the southeastern kestrel. Additionally, our region is home to 73 state protected plant species. Groundwater is the main source of potable water in Central Florida and is critical for aquatic habitat. The Floridian Aquifer and Biscayne Sole Source Aquifer are the primary source of water in the region, and like all aquifers, they have recharge and discharge areas. Recharge areas are those where water enters the aquifer in response to rainfall and infiltration, while discharge areas are areas where water leaves the aquifer as surface water discharge. And the map on the screen provides, identifies and prioritizes recharge areas based on their importance for spring and water supply. Our transportation decisions significantly impact the air we breathe. As our region continues to grow, understanding the key sources of emissions will continue to be essential to maintain and improve our air quality and promote a healthy environment. MetroPlan Orlando is federally mandated to report the region's air quality. Currently, our ozone is within the national standard of 70 parts per billion within our four monitoring sites, reporting with a range of 63 to 67 parts per billion. This is a good thing, but however, as we trend upward, we need to be aware of what we can do to improve our air quality. And for this reason, MetroPlan Orlando partnered with the University of Central Florida to study air pollution in the region and to create a list of strategies to mitigate the pollution causes by transportation sources. As part of the 2050 MTP updates, we saw input from state, federal, and non-government stakeholders to initiate coordination identifying the most pressing regional environmental issues. We invited and met with environmental stakeholders and held meetings focused on specific areas of interest and expertise. For instance, we met with agencies that are responsible for wetlands as a group and agencies that are responsible for threatened and endangered species as another group. We also met with non-government organizations and interested groups to discuss a wide range of issues, including conservation lands and the wildlife corridor. And these stakeholder interviews provided important input during the process. Wetlands, air quality, water quality, flood protection, resiliency, habitat loss, and wildlife connectivity were all identified as some of the top regional priorities that should be considered in future projects. And as part of the transportation project planning process, MetroPlan Orlando pre-screens transportation projects recommended using the FDOT Efficient Transportation Decision Making, or ETDM, environmental screening tool. And the screening includes wetlands, floodplains, protected species, habitat, contaminated sites, historical resources, and archaeological resources. As previously mentioned, we partner with UCF to assess air quality in our region. As part of the UCF Air Quality Report, 72 strategies for air quality mitigation were identified and 27 were fully evaluated. And key strategies included those that minimize impacts to the environmental resources, including environmental studies and mitigation efforts as part of the transportation project recommendations in the 2050 MTP, with funding included to perform those evaluations, and encouraging multimodal travel to reduce emissions and improve air quality. Now that we've discussed environmental, we're going to move on to resilience. So we've discussed how we aim to mitigate impacts to different parts of our existing environment, and now we're going to look at different ways we are being strategic in how we can minimize the impacts our transportation infrastructure has from environmental impacts in order to build a more resilient and reliable network. So what is a resilient strategy? A resilient strategy involves an assessment of risk from environmental factors to the transportation infrastructure in the region. And this is important because once the risks are identified, a plan can be put in place for the adoption of measures and best practices to make these identified transportation assets resilient. In Central Florida, we experience a wide variety of hazards. These include extreme heat, tropical storms and hurricanes, storms and lightning, and inland flooding. And a shock is a sudden environmental event or a potentially large impact in our area, while a stressor occurs more regularly but still impacts all of us. For instance, a hurricane or a 100-year flood are considered a shock, while more regular events like heat waves or lightning are stressors on our critical transportation infrastructure. So we performed an exposure or sensitivity risk assessment of our infrastructure to environmental hazards. This assessment looked at how much harm or impact hazards could have on people, places, and things in our area. And we were able to see visually what parts of our transportation network expected annual losses due to these hazards. We also looked at our adaptive capacity, in other words, our ability to bounce back after these hazards occur. So we combine these results with a critically assessment of transportation infrastructure, focusing on connections to key locations such as hospitals, emergency response providers, and power plants. This created a composite risk assessment, which identified both the most critical corridors and the environmental risk factors. And knowing these items now allows us to refine future transportation improvements to mitigate any potential impacts for these risk factors. Using this information, recommendations were developed as part of the 2050 MTP, and this helps ensure that our journey to 2050 plans for a more resilient Central Florida.
Thank you, Jason. Okay, wow, we just covered a lot of material here. I'm going to ask our planners to please come back and join us. I'm turning on my camera. We've actually gotten to the part of the session where we're going to be doing question and answers. There's still people actually trickling in, and we have a lot of questions that are queued up. Again, we did cover a lot of content, but I'm going to go ahead and answer. I'm going to ask some of these questions, and I will try to maneuver it to one of the planners. You can jump in if you feel you are ready to go ahead and answer some of these questions that we've received. Okay, so the first question we have is, how will the plan tackle the growing impact of heat?
Sure, I can take this one. So extreme heat was one of the environmental hazards that we based our assessment on for the resilience section of the MTP. And as part of the resilience strategy, we encourage policies that will look at exploring extreme heat mitigation measures, such as continuous tree canopy and/or shade structures along transportation corridors that support active transportation options, such as transit, walking, and bicycling. We also encourage investment in infrastructure to improve transit stations and reduce the risk of heat-related illnesses. And I know on a local basis, Lynx is in the process of finalizing their bus stop design guide, which explains the cost of different bus stop improvements and the ridership threshold. And they have some information about tree canopy in there as well.
Okay, thank you. The next question we have, this is for Sarah. This is kind of question 2 and 3. I'm gonna meld together. So, it's about housing. So, how can we push for new development to prioritize walkability and green spaces over cheap housing plans and roads? And then also, how can we ensure transit options are more carefully considered during planning for new housing and developments?
All right. Thank you for 2 questions there. So
People want to know.
I want to know too. So much of the onus relating to ensuring new development includes walkable green spaces. We'll require local government agencies to update and improve land and building development codes to include these requirements. So while home builders consider developing land in neighborhoods attractive to buyers, they're often only subject to the minimum requirements laid out in the local land use related plans and policies. So is local jurisdictions also improve new developments? They can work with developers to ensure that they are building with walkability and accessibility in mind. They can also make sure that developers include sidewalks, for example. And then, talking more about, improving their own land use requirements. This could be reducing or eliminating parking minimums. That way developments aren't so stretched out. When things are closer together, it makes it more walkable. And then pulling in transit. So to ensure that transit is best considered with new housing and development plans, counties and cities can improve integration of land use and transportation planning as a part of their comprehensive planning process, requiring early collaboration with transit agencies like Links to align housing approvals with transit access that are also supportive. I talked a little bit earlier about transit-oriented design, with that, making sure that there's sidewalks that, connect to the bus stops and that sort of thing. So, working with Links, and other transit agencies, say, hey, we're going to build a development here, and we'll put the sidewalk in so that way you can place the bus stop in. So, it's all about improving collaboration and communication early on in the process.
Sarah, you had said that this was the first time that the housing element has been brought into the MTP.
Right.
Okay. Just reiterating what you had
Yep.
shared earlier for some that just joined us. Okay, we're going on to the next question. Question 4. What are the plans to build a network of bicycle infrastructure that connects residents to public transit, businesses, and schools?
I can take that one, Leilani. So MetroPlan Orlando led the development of an active transportation plan not too long ago, which really focused on evaluating the existing bicycle and pedestrian networks and how they can be improved or expanded to provide increased accessibility to these locations, public transit stops, businesses, schools, other essential services, jobs, seeing that these are a network for transportation, not just recreation. So that active transportation plan has already been published to our website, and the results of which have been incorporated directly into the 2050 MTP as our active transportation needs assessment. And that really gave us a head start for identifying and determining needs for our next 25 years of transportation improvements.
Awesome. Thank you, Taylor.
Mhm.
Okay. On to the next one. How can we bring bus rapid transit to Orlando, specifically on Colonial Drive?
I can take this one. So another a component of the 2050 MTP is our transit vision plan. And I've been overseeing that work. So BRT on State Route 50 is within our vision. It's, we would love to see that. We identify it as a high priority corridor for bus rapid transit. However, the big caveat here is funding. It's easy to say, oh, it would be great to have something. But if we can't afford to pay for it, then unfortunately it can't happen. And something like bus rapid transit can get quite expensive, not only with the initial capital investment of repurposing a lane or creating a new lane for the bus route, but also the continued operations of having the buses, paying the drivers, that sort of thing. So it is high cost, unfortunately, but we do identify it as a need for the region.
Thank you, Sarah. Here's another question. What is being done to coordinate different transportation types or modalities?
Okay, I can take that one as well. So through the development of the MTP, we have performed individual mode specific needs assessments to be able to do a deep dive on specific transportation needs. So that includes active transportation as a mode, people-powered movement, transit, complete streets or urban corridor improvements, technology improvements, or operational adjustments, just to name a few of the different categories that we looked at. Once we finished those individual kind of deep dives on each of those modes, we then took all of those identified and discrete needs and looked at them together to look at consolidation opportunities and group projects together where there were recommendations all for the same location. So this is more of a completing the street verb kind of method, and that's intended to help streamline the implementation of future transportation improvements if and when any of these projects move forward when funding becomes available.
Okay. This next question kind of is along the same lines of this person's asking, how are you coordinating with new Transportation Mobility Advisory Committee, Transmac?
Yes, I think that's a new committee with Orange County.
Yeah.
But we have been coordinating extensively, not only with Orange County, but each of our 3 counties, all 20 of our cities and towns, our transportation operating partners, Lynx and Sunrail, the Florida Department of Transportation. We can keep going on with this list for a little while, but
Yeah.
all of our local transportation agencies. We have had MTP specific technical workshops every 2 months with each of these agencies for the past year and a half, where we have gone into, well, deep dives deep in the weeds on the development of the 2050 MTP and all of its respective topics. If you're curious about any of those, all of those workshops have been recorded and published to our YouTube channel, and they're available there for your perusal. But we have also been meeting with each of these agencies more frequently through our Metro Plan Orlando board and advisory committee meeting process, and through several one-on-one meetings with each of these agencies to make sure that we were really honing in on the right topics and customizing the MTP for our journey to 2050.
Continuing to have those conversations with the right people and planning as we're going, right?
Mhm.
Thank you, Taylor. Okay, this question is for Sarah. Seems it's high density, high poverty areas that are trending for every negative health marker except high cholesterol. How is walkability being prioritized in local planning as that daily needs like grocery shopping or commuting can realistically be done on foot or by bike, not just as recreation?
Right. Thanks again for that question. So this is kind of a multi-pronged response, because we're looking at multiple different types of health indicators. When you're thinking about, for example, asthma, that obviously is impacted by the lack of walkable resources, but a lot of that is impacted by the number of commuters driving into those communities. And their vehicles have emissions that are causing negative health impacts on and air pollution in the air, so that can potentially cause higher rates of asthma. But if you're looking at something like coronary heart disease, then yes, that can be impacted by a lack of walkability. So despite being densely populated, these areas can still lack walkable infrastructure that supports everyday needs, like grocery access, healthcare, jobs, or transit, and not just recreational uses. Local and regional planning is increasingly prioritizing walkability and accessibility. Taylor kind of already mentioned, that we undertook our active transportation plan. Also, we've developed a complete streets plan, to also continue that effort towards walkability. But this can also, for our local municipal partners and our county partners, regional planning that is includes zoning for mixed use neighborhoods, adopting complete streets policies themselves if they don't already have one, investing in sidewalks and bike lanes and safe crossings, because it's not just about walking parallel, people will cross the road too. So making sure that those crossings are all safe. So transportation planners are aligning with transit access and walkability and biking infrastructure. It's all connected. And again, that's just another reason why we've chosen to include this in the long range plan.
Yes. Thank you, Sarah. This next question is for Taylor. I'm new here, so I'm wondering what exactly does Metro Plan Orlando do in relation to County Public Works and FDOT?
All right. Well, then, welcome to Central Florida, or welcome to Metro Plan Orlando, new to whichever or both. Well, in short, the State Department of Transportation plays a key role in transportation planning and project delivery alongside us and other metropolitan planning organizations, as well as city and county governments. Now, each of these different organizations has different scopes and responsibilities, so I will keep this brief, but they are specific and very different. So the state provides oversight and policy direction and establishes technical guidelines and safety standards used across the whole state for their purview. MPOs, and such as Metro Plan Orlando, coordinate and plan regional transportation, while city and county governments manage and implement local services and infrastructure, including transportation within their own boundaries. So more specifically, the MPO study area really covers the entire urbanized area that spans multiple cities, multiple counties, in our instance. And because of this, the MPO brings together all of our local governments, transit agencies, and the public to create a unified transportation plan, which represents our 2050 MTP, as well as several other documents that we create. But we're really focusing on managing those federal transportation funds and assuring it aligns with those regional goals.
Thank you, Taylor, for the explanation and the refresher. We have our next question. This is still for Taylor. Taylor, what is being done to handle the large and growing volume of traffic that is occurring in southern Kissimmee and Point Siena?
So we're seeing a lot of growth, not only in Kissimmee and Point Siena areas, but in other areas within our 3-county region. So we have looked at 2050 traffic forecasts and developed those for the 2050 MTP to really look at where those growth areas are not only being seen now, but 25 years from now in the future. So we can look at those specific areas and come up with transportation improvements to address not only the issues we're experiencing now, but through 2050. So while I don't have the needs assessment and those project recommendations in front of me right now, that's something we can follow up on.
Okay, thank you. This one is for Sarah. When developing a strategy to enhance access by individuals traveling to health services, was there consideration of the growing use of virtual and home delivered care? This may reduce the number of travelers as services will increasingly be offered at home.
Thank you for your question, Ken. I saw this was from you. So kudos to Ken Peach. He was actually a part of developing the health component of the 2050 MTP and our health strategic plan. So we have a lot of love for Ken Peach. But so yes, that was included. We identified it as one of our strategies. I didn't get to talk too much about. We have a long list of different strategies to help us achieve those desired outcomes and those goals, but it is listed as one of them. Things are still, we're 5 years out. From the big switch over, but a lot of things have stayed the same, that bringing things to home, or having those virtual doctor's appointments rather than going in. So seeing how those kind of trends continue on, it's really important for us to continue to talk to our health partners and hear their feedback on that sort of thing. So working with our county partners, I know that a lot of them have mobile health units, to help with things like breast cancer screenings. And so that's something that we do factor into, when it comes to figuring out how people are getting to medical appointments. But, again, going back to our public opinion research survey, we've asked this question twice now. We had it first in 2019, and then we had it again in 2024. In 2019, 1/5 of people said that they had missed a doctor's appointment due to lack of reliable transportation, and then that number increased. So more people were missing doctor's appointments because of lack of reliable transportation in 2024. And this is self-reported. So it's something that we're going to continue to investigate, because while it's great that we have virtual services or home health care, it's not the end all be all right now. So we're continuing to look into it.
Thank you, Sarah. This next question is for Taylor. I walk and bike a lot and have seen maintenance and design issues with the bike lanes being overgrown and poorly maintained. What can be done about this?
Oh, well, that's not something we like hearing about, but a good question to ask. How do we share that information? So I would recommend reaching out directly to either your city or county's public works department so they can communicate that with their maintenance teams, or if it's a larger improvement, get that in the works to be able to address that in the future. And I don't have their individual contact points right now, but we can probably include the three counties' Public Works contact information in our formal responses, so you can have those as easy access.
Okay, so contact your city and county public works departments. So whatever trail you're on, and then whatever city or county you're in, their public works departments is who you would contact, right? You said?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you, Taylor. This next question looks like it's for Sarah. Sarah, bus rapid transit or BRT would be amazing, but are there smaller things we can do while funding is secured, like bus prioritized traffic signals?
Yes, the short answer is yes that we can do that, but again, the caveat is always is funding dependent. If let's say, going back to 50, State Road 50, Colonial Drive, if there are sections that, are needing improvements, such as repaving or signal improvements, that's something that they can look at integrating into those improvements. Of course, there is, an additional cost there, but Orange County, could work with Links to determine how best they want to go about achieving those improvements. You mentioned bus signals. Another one would be queue jumps, which is where the bus kind of gets to jump in front of all the traffic, at a stop. So there are definitely different improvements that aren't just going all the way full BRT. And that would be, up to whoever owns the road and maintains the road and working with Links. And of course, we're always supportive of those types of improvements. So yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next question. What is the current state of planning for increased Sunrail service in connection to the airport?
Right. So there's a couple things going on there, but I would recommend reaching out directly to Sunrail specifically, as there is a project development and environment study ongoing. You've likely heard of it called as the Sunshine Corridor. That's where the different options are being evaluated right now, and that would be the best place for the most up-to-date information.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. We have a question for Jason. What steps are being taken to minimize the environmental impact of the transportation plan?
Sure. So through the process of the MTP, we've created a database of existing environmental resources in the region, which is kind of what I presented on earlier. And these will help us avoid potential impacts for transportation projects. We've also met with environmental stakeholders and experts to discuss potential mitigation strategies in the event that environmental impacts are unavoidable. And it should be noted that the vast majority of the transportation needs items identified in the 2050 MTP are located within already disturbed areas and within the existing right-of-way as much as feasible.
Okay, staying on the same topic, Jason, what measures are in place to protect natural habitats and green spaces during the implementation of the transportation plan?
Sure. So kind of very similar. Avoidance of impacts to the natural habitat and green spaces, as well as other environmental resources, is obviously the preferred method. But we do have several mitigation strategies in place as well. The first being that the vast majority of the transportation needs items identified are located within already disturbed areas and within the existing right-of-way. We also have included environmental evaluations in the budgeting for nearly every single transportation improvement project anticipated to be funded by MetroPlan Orlando, showing our commitment to building responsibility. And in the event that a transportation project may have more environmental impacts, then we'll perform a preliminary environmental screening using the FDOT's environmental screening tool, which is kind of what I presented on earlier. which can highlight important areas of consideration early during the planning phase. That way we can try to avoid those or minimize impacts.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Thank you to all of the planners actually for giving such thoughtful responses to these questions. We're actually at the time we're going to be ending our program. I'm looking, let me go ahead and put the slide share back up. Just a quick reminder, our upcoming webinar is September 11th, and that's where we're going to be talking about our multimodal needs assessment. So again, after this meeting, if you missed any of the earlier presentation that the planners had, you can go to our YouTube channel and check out the recording that is going to be posted. And then you can always go to metroplanorlando.gov to follow along with how the plan is being updated as we are continuing to go throughout this process to December when we are planning for adoption. You can also follow us on our social media channels as well. And then also at the end of this webinar, we're going to be sending a short survey, evaluation survey about this webinar and the contents of it, and if you've found it helpful. And so if you have an opportunity to take that, we'd really appreciate it. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.